Have you ever had an experience where you've listened to a book or maybe read a book and you had an instant moment of clarity, an aha, an insight that you couldn't quite grasp up until that moment in time, and all of a sudden, there it was, spoken aloud or typed on a page? Well, today I'm going to share with you 5 must-read or must-listen books that have delivered a ton of moments just like the ones I shared. Welcome to episode number 283 of the Amplify Your Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Yong Pratt, also known as Dr. Content, because I help you fix whatever ails your content. Something you may not know about me is that I love books. I love learning. I love reading. I even belong to a local business book club so that I can geek out every month over books with other people who like to do the same thing. Over the past 6 months or so, and especially during quarantine, audiobooks have become my jam, which is really surprising because I used to think they were so boring to listen to, especially the non-fiction variety. Audiobooks have literally become my go-to resource for learning, relaxing, and even getting into the headspace, especially on days when taking action feels really hard. You ever have one of those days? Rohn said, "For things to change, you must change. For things to get better, you have to get better. For things to improve, you have to improve. When you grow, everything in your life grows with you." And I 100% believe that books have allowed me to get better in so many areas of my life. So let's talk about 5 books that have positively impacted my life, especially how I show up and what I no longer do. This last part is key because I'm a big believer in simplifying and making things easier and more efficient. If you happen to be on my email list, I recently sent out an email about things called the shadow self and the bad wolf. And these ideas have come about in not just one of these books, but 2 of them that I'm going to share with you today. A couple of months ago, probably 3, maybe 4, I was chatting with one of my podcasting students that actually lives in my same small town. Amy Eisman is the host of the Dear Creativity podcast, which I definitely think needs to be on your podcast listening queue. She was telling me about an interview she had done with Jackie Johnstone about something called human design. At the time, I had no idea what human design even was. I had never heard that phrase. Amy thought the topic might resonate with me based on our conversations, so I went to go listen. At the time, Jackie's Design for Brilliance Collective was open for enrollment. And without knowing much about her or human design other than my introduction from Amy, I jumped in with both feet. If you don't happen to know what human design is, you're definitely not alone. I've heard human design described in lots of different ways, and the easiest to understand is that it's a cross between the Myers-Briggs personality test and astrology. In reality, it is so much more. It combines the ideas of the I Ching, astrology, the chakra system, and quantum physics, all in relation to your birth date, your place of birth, and your time of birth. Needless to say that my journey into human design has been really, really interesting. I've learned that I am an emotional projector, and within human design, there's something called the shadow self, which is the person you become when you're not in alignment with your design. I still have so much to learn, and I'm so grateful for Jackie and the members of the collective for helping me to dive in to all the ways I've been designed to show up and to contribute. And that brings us to the first book I want to share. Its title is Getting to Know You. Embrace your unique blueprint to make decisions you love and trust, and it's by Flaherty. I initially got the book in PDF form, and to my surprise, it came with access to the audiobook, which was awesome. I think I listened to the entire thing in a single day because it was that good. I have to say that it's been a fascinating journey to really dive in and dissect the many ways in which we're all wired differently. Within human design, I've learned about the best ways to make decisions, the best ways to show up here and on the podcast and on videos. I've learned that for parts of my life, I've actually been acting out of my design, which those moments didn't turn out great because they were not congruent. I've learned to be patient with myself and am beginning to understand the power of human design as it relates to all things in business and how I relate to and can help others being my authentic self. Karen's book was a really great introduction to human design because she gives lots of really relevant, easy to understand examples. And it doesn't dive too deeply into the more sciencey or esoteric side of human design, so that's my first recommendation for you. Book number 2 is Kate Northrop's Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for ambitious women. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you already know that here at Amplify Your Awesome, we love geeking out about and talking about all things productivity and the idea of working smarter, not harder, so the title of Kate's book really hooked me from the get-go. Before getting this book on Audible, I did what most of us do and read a lot of reviews. And this book in particular got a lot of mixed reviews because it dives into things like looking at our monthly cycles as women from the viewpoint of productivity. At first, it didn't make a whole lot of sense why we would even take that into consideration. However, when she shared the reasons behind this, it all made sense. And in fact, it actually made me a little bit frustrated because of the world, especially the world of business, because it doesn't take into account the way the female body is designed with its natural rhythms and cycles. Once I understood the importance of our cycles and how they have impacted productivity, it made so much more sense. This was another book I listened to in a single afternoon. And at the time I got the book, we were actually out in the yard preparing for a friend's wedding. Our friend's wedding venue got canceled because of quarantine, so we offered up our backyard. So Kate's voice was in my ears the whole time we were raking pine needles, mowing the lawn, trimming trees, and getting everything ready for the ceremony. And I really think that listening to this book in one go really helped me to understand and solidify the concepts in the book in my mind. So that's number 2, Do Less by Kate Northrop. Number 3 is a book I heard about probably a year or so ago. My friend Dave Albin introduced me to this book at a mastermind event in Texas last spring. And he talked highly of a book called The Big Leap, which is written by Gay Hendricks. In the book, Gay shares that often when it comes to making shifts in our lives, or making pivots and doing things, especially big, scary things, we tend to self-sabotage, or he has a term called upper limiting ourselves, which prevents us from moving forward. So it really brought to attention what things are we actually doing subconsciously that stop us from making big strides to get to that next level. One of the examples he used was about a professor who was meant to give a presentation to his peers at his local university. And right before the presentation, he lost his voice. And the reason was, when he and Gay dove into it a little further, was that actually he had been offered a position at another university. So this was going to be his last presentation, and he really wasn't feeling like he wanted to do that, knowing he was leaving. So the way his body really upper limited him was by doing something that he least expected, and that was the loss of his voice. It was really fascinating as I listened to all these stories unfold because I could so clearly see, because of course hindsight is 20/20, right? That I had dealt with so many similar events in my life. I had lost my voice. I had gotten sick all of a sudden, even though I wasn't unwell before. And when I look back, they all happened to be surrounded by big changes or scary decisions that were kind of imminent. The other really cool thing about Gay's book was his discussion of time. So many of us, including myself, often say there's not enough time to do this or to do that. And he talks about how time, in most of our views and our experience, is a very Newtonian principle. And this principle says that time is finite. There's only so much of it. We only have so many hours in a day, and time kind of marches along the same for all of us. However, he talks about something called Einstein time, about how we ourselves are the source of time. We are where time originates. So when we approach tasks like our to-do list or the things we need to get done, maybe for a launch coming up, if we can really get into the mindset of being in Einstein time, there will always be plenty of time to get everything done. Using Einstein time helps us to get into that state of flow, and we can actually expand time. And there's a whole chapter in the book devoted just to talking about Einstein time. Now, when I first heard about this idea of Einstein time, I thought it was interesting, but it couldn't possibly be true, right? Because I had never heard of it before. So, of course, I had to put it to the test and do an experiment, and that's when things got really fun. And I definitely recommend that you conduct your own Einstein time experiment once you've listened to the book. I just finished listening to the book again for probably the third time because it was the most recent selection for my book club. And interestingly, I've seen several posts from friends just this week who are reading or rereading this book. So that's number 3, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. The next 2 books, 4 and 5, are by the same author who happens to be one of my mentors. His name is Dean Graziosi, and I'm part of his KBB family, or the Knowledge Broker Blueprint family that he teaches alongside of Tony Robbins. I know I've shared before that I joined KBB around Christmas time last year. The way they break down and inspire us to teach what we know to others, from the terminology they use to the step-by-step actions, is the reason I chose to invest in myself. And the first book of Dean's that I want to share with you is called Millionaire Success Habits: The Gateway to Wealth and Prosperity. When I went to go search for this book, I happened to find the entire audiobook on SoundCloud for absolutely nothing. And I will be sure to link it up on today's show notes at yongpratt.com/283, so you can also listen for free. Now, because this book was free, it was a total no-brainer with a really low barrier to entry. I'm not really a huge fan of SoundCloud, but I was willing to download the app just to listen to this book, and I've listened twice through already. This book dives into how people think differently depending on their financial status. I was raised in a family that didn't have a lot of money. There were a ton of struggles and lots of arguments about money in my house. Those money stories, even though they weren't mine, they belonged to my parents, but because I heard them for so long, they became my stories too. And here's the thing. Those stories about the lack of money and how hard money is to make probably weren't my parents' stories either. They probably belonged to their parents before them and before them even. And while I've thought about the idea of money stories several times in my adult life, listening to this book and the way he lays out the steps to rewrite those stories has really made an impact on how I think about showing up, serving, and, of course, getting paid. Now, remember when I shared with you that the idea of the shadow self or the bad wolf shows up in not one, but two of the books I'm going to share? This is the second book. In this book, Dean really describes in great detail about a fable about the good wolf and the bad wolf, and about how we get to choose by what we feed which wolf really takes over our lives. So it's really interesting to hear the story about the good wolf and the bad wolf, and just the different ways in which people who are millionaires or who have an abundance of money think differently and act differently, and how we can take our stories and flip the script by rewriting them. So that's book number 4, Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. Book number 5, also by Dean, is called The Underdog Advantage. Rewrite your future by turning your disadvantages into your superpowers. How many of you believe you're underdogs? The idea that you have some disadvantage that prevents you from creating the life of your dreams. I'm over here raising my hand right now, and I know so many people consider themselves underdogs. What Dean does in this book is to help us turn our disadvantages into our superpowers. Whether it's a lack of resources, a lack of finances, or a lack of a support system, we can actually turn those disadvantages into our advantages, or as he calls them, superpowers. And I think of all the books on this list, this is the one that everyone can listen to and benefit most from, especially if you've ever at some point in your life considered yourself an underdog in any arena. If you're looking to flip the script, flip those old stories, change your story, and use your disadvantages as your advantages, this is definitely the book to start with. This is a really good book, and I actually got it as part of doing Dean's Start Over Challenge that he recently hosted. Now, I did upgrade from the free challenge and paid something like $12 to access this audiobook. Plus, I got a ton of other video resources from Dean and Tony. So for me, it was a no-brainer decision because I really wanted the audiobook, and I'll tell you with 100% certainty that this book has been a game changer because we all have stories, we all have disadvantages that we can reframe so that we can turn those disadvantages into our superpowers. In the book, Dean shares a story of when he was growing up, he had dyslexia, and he couldn't read very well, so he was bullied because of it. People kept telling him that he wasn't smart enough because he didn't do well in school, and he wasn't going to go far in life. But he actually used that disadvantage as fuel to his fire to help him get to where he is today. So this is definitely a must-read or must-listen. So my friends, there you have it. 5 must-listen or read, if you prefer, audiobooks to help you stand up, show up, and make a bigger impact. Let's do a quick recap. Book number 1 is Karen Flaherty's Getting to Know You, Embrace Your Unique Blueprint to Make Decisions You Love. Book number 2, Kate Northrop's Do Less, a revolutionary approach to time and energy management for ambitious women. Book number 3 by Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. Conquer your hidden fear and take life to the next level. Book 4 by Dean Graziosi, Millionaire Success Habits, The Gateway to Wealth and Prosperity. And finally, The Underdog Advantage. Rewrite your future by turning your disadvantages into your superpowers. Now, I want to hear from you. Come on over to yongpratt.com/283 and let me know which book you're going to start to listen or read first. And once you've listened or read them, I want to hear your biggest takeaways and ahas because, like I shared earlier, I kind of geek out over this stuff and love to chat about books and how they've impacted my life with others. And as we wrap up this episode, I want to make a public declaration. I'm committing to you, my awesome listeners, right here, right now, that I'll be adding my own audiobooks to this list in the future. That's right. I'm committing to creating an audiobook version of my first book, Raising a Superhero: How to Unleash Your Child's 8 Superpowers and Propel Learning Through the Arts. Until then, you can get the book on Amazon, which I'll be sure to link up in today's show notes. Plus, I'm committing to recording the audiobook for my second book once it's published, which is going to be called Raising a Creator. Okay, so saying that out loud kind of freaks me out a little bit because it's big and scary and it feels a little bit overwhelming. However, I know that I can serve so many more of you, entrepreneurial parents, by publishing these audiobooks so that you can take me with you wherever you go by popping me into your earbuds. Okay, my friends, I look forward to having more conversations with you about these 5 audiobooks, and if you have recommendations, I definitely want to hear them over at youngpratt.com/283. Until next time, happy reading and happy listening.